Toronto is growing all around us and constantly evolving. We see the various stages of this growth everywhere, whether it's through a new condo building or the closure of the last industry in a community. Our city is faced with both great opportunities and challenges in planning for change. More often than not, if the change isn't happening in our neighbourhoods, we usually only read about or think about the change at a distance. We realise that in order to really plan for change, we need to visit and experience these places on the ground. To get a deeper understanding of the planning system and reflect on some of the current issues in planning, we decided to visit some of the projects and sites featured in Toronto City Planning's 2014 annual report. Along the way, we discovered that some of the planning issues in Toronto are age-old questions about equity and representation, while others are tied to the most pressing social challenges created by a shifting economy, environmental concerns, and new technology. Our goal is to bring an on-the-ground perspective to some of city planning's activity in 2014 and reflect on what we learned from our experiences as service learning students. The annual report illustrates some of the ways that planning shapes the built environment and affects people's lives.
We started by going to the Portlands, site of the one and only working port in Toronto with an area the size of downtown. The Portlands planning framework is being developed by City Planning in partnership with Waterfront Toronto to transform the entire 350-hectare lands into a vibrant urban district while maintaining a working port and active industry. Reading about this had a completely different impact on us to the moment when we were actually able to look out over this vast area. Walking through the Portlands, we were struck by the size of the planning area and the scale of the project. It's incredible to think that one part of the project calls for the Don River to be diverted as a flood protection measure. Here you can see the mouth of the river, which currently ends at a 90-degree angle, posing a significant flood risk. Looking at the scale, we were daunted by the huge amount of vision needed to reimagine this industrial center as a place thousands of people would call home.
Like the Portlands, City Planning undertook a study of the South Niagara planning area. The study focused on how to revitalise the community after losing major industry, and considered how to make the best use of valuable land close to the downtown and in a growing part of the city. The study makes a number of proposals, including expanding and connecting the area's park network and preserving the key heritage sites, in part by adaptively reusing a former incinerator known as a Wellington Destructor. With the loss of industry, change is already happening, so the study is an opportunity to shape the direction of that change. It left us considering the challenge of translating a vision or set of goals into a set of practical tools, like an official plan amendment and a public realm framework. After the Quality Meats abattoir left and the Destructor closed down, there was a void to be filled, and in some ways a blank slate. Being on the ground here made us appreciate the endless possibilities of this context, something we couldn't see in the same way when we just read and researched about the decisions and actions ultimately taken. Visiting this place showed us a fuller picture of everything that could have been considered for the area.
One of the most thought-provoking stops was in an apartment neighborhood near Flemington Park. In 2014, Council adopted City Planning's recommendation to create the Residential Apartment Commercial Zone, which would allow community and commercial uses to locate in 499 apartment neighborhood sites. The apartment neighborhoods are single-use, difficult to access by transit, and separated from the amenities we use daily. Walking around this area gave us an appreciation of the possibilities created by the zoning. We were struck by questions about how decisions are made on when and how things are changed. We were left wondering why this change took place in 2014, when the effects of the former zoning had been presumably felt for years before then.
Here you're seeing the 6 Points Interchange, an infamous highway-style junction in Etobicoke Centre where Dundas Street West, Bloor Street West and Kipling Avenue all meet. In its current form, 6 Points is a series of ramps and bridges where the traffic is free-flowing. This makes it difficult for pedestrians and cyclists to navigate the area and splits the neighbourhood. City Planning has created a plan to reconfigure the area for complete streets and a new open space system. We went to the 6 Points Interchange partly because of its history as a planning issue. There has been a talk of resolving it for decades. We were also drawn to it as an example of planning to create change. Nothing would change here unless there was a proactive effort to create something new. In contrast to the South Niagara study, for example, the context here hasn't changed. This infrastructure has been in place since the 60s. The work envisioned at 6 Points is different from getting community benefits through a rezoning or setting out policy in an official plan. Instead, This is an example of changing the physical environment to allow an area to achieve its full potential as one of the 4 centres of Toronto.
Eglinton Connects integrates with one of the most iconic projects currently underway in Toronto. The under-construction Eglinton Crosstown LRT will connect the east and west of the city from Scarborough to Etobicoke and run through many different neighbourhoods. The Eglinton Connects plan creates a vision for a complete street along the whole length of the LRT, with the city's longest dedicated bike lanes, new public spaces, and 78 blocks rezoned to allow mid-rise development, which is expected to help accommodate the city's growing population without disrupting the character of existing residential neighbourhoods. As we traveled along the avenue heading west, we wondered, how will the plans for mid-rise translate into reality given the existing uses along this avenue? Where will these existing uses go? Can the physical transformation of a single street really connect vastly different parts of the city?
We had similar questions as we travelled along Dufferin Street, another corridor that straddles the city's urban-suburban frontier. An avenue study was conducted in 2014 for the stretch between Lawrence Avenue and the 401. The study proposes a vision to transform this auto-oriented pass-through corridor into a walkable, mixed-use community. As you can see, development is already happening here.
These studies show how planning responds to and creates change at a rapid pace in Toronto. Development review is the other major tool used by city planning to manage change. We've all seen these signs around Toronto. Development review is the process of evaluating development proposals and making recommendations to council on whether projects should be approved and given permission to be built. Planners consider how a development will impact all facets of life in a neighborhood or area, from water services and waste infrastructure to the shadow, wind, and traffic effects of the proposed development. The review process is also the place where community benefits are negotiated.
This is the site of one of the most controversial development proposals in 2014. This small stretch of King Street West is the site for the Mervish-Gary proposal, which will see 2 towers of 82 stories and 92 stories built on and around the site of the Princess Wales Theatre. It highlighted to us how planners can really collaborate with everyone who has a stake in a project, and do that in a way that isn't just using another buzzword. The initial proposal was much larger and much more challenging from a planning perspective, but by working with council and the developers, city planning helped carefully craft a better outcome. The development review process resulted in the conservation of 3 designated heritage properties that had been proposed for demolition. This seems like a worthwhile statistic, but standing in front of the site made us appreciate that heritage preservation isn't just about the number of old buildings you save. It's about enhancing and preserving people's experiences of their city.
The pace and type of growth in Toronto has been controversial at times. Visiting other sites left us with questions about the development review process and how certain places come to look the way they do.
Through our journey around the city, the process and outcomes of city planning and their resulting impact on our lives became more relatable. Our first-hand observations of these projects gave us a renewed appreciation for city planners' work, but also reminded us of the challenges of deciding the way things ought to be. We also thought about what planning for change really means. In some cases, planning serves to create change that solves specific problems. In others, planning responds to changes that are happening, like population growth and the increasing desire for people to live close to where they work. We were also left considering the importance of perspective. Planning with maps and neighbourhood surveys can lead to a very different view of a community compared to being on the ground. This distinction between planning experience on the page and planning experience on the ground has become a valuable metaphor for us. Planning on the ground enables us to see and think about the world from the perspective of the people who will be affected by our plans. It was a reminder of what meaningful consultation and careful consideration of the local perspective can achieve. It also taught us a little more about what we could gain through service learning as we stepped off the page and onto the ground.